Well, good afternoon, everyone. I was getting flashbacks there of when they used to have City 101.9 here in New York back in the days. Right? Welcome to our celebration of Black History Month. My name is Jerry Rosa, and I am the Director of Student Activities at Ostos. I have the pleasure of being joined by my esteemed colleague, Dr. Eric Radeski, Director of Governmental and External Affairs, who will serve as my co-host during this event. Please note that this event is being recorded and that there is a live transcript at the bottom of the screen. Today's event will include greetings from the Ostos president and several of our Bronx elected officials, followed by a discussion on the topic of mental health. Specifically, why is it so hard for people to open up about mental health issues? This is an issue that exists not only in the Black community or in communities of color, but in all communities. We will discuss mental health as a general issue that affects us all, and also consider in which communities of color and the African American community in particular are affected. Mental health is an issue that is very common, but for some reason, it's not often discussed. When we have a headache or a body ache, we do not feel embarrassed to talk about it. In fact, we often ask people for advice or get medication to alleviate it. Wouldn't it be great if those who suffer from a mental health condition could just ask for help without fear of being rejected or ridiculed? Wouldn't it be great if they could just go to the bodega, buy 2 mental health aspirins, and call it a day? Unfortunately, that is not the case. And we're faced with a society in which the number of mental health cases continues to rise day by day. This forum will discuss how we look at mental health, what are some of the factors contributing to its rise, and what are some of the things that we can do to help those affected by its many forms. Before our conversation begins, I would like to introduce Dr. Daisy Coco de Filippis, President of Ostos Community College, who will share some remarks.
Thank you, everyone, and good afternoon and welcome. Today's forum is particularly relevant in the wake of the ongoing pandemic. As Jerry Rosa has already mentioned, mental health issues have been exacerbated by the monumental strain created by widespread illness and loss of life. Black communities have been especially hard hit. In conjunction with the effects of COVID-19, they face a constellation of factors affecting mental health: systemic racism, economic disparity, inadequate access to treatment, and police brutality, to name only a few. This situation is complicated by the culture's uninformed attitudes toward mental illness. Perceptions of mental illness have changed for the better, but it is still stigmatized and there is much work to be done. And I could tell you, it is the Black community, it's also the Latino community, it's also these young people who have been so isolated. It is a huge concern. I would like to thank our moderators, Jerry Rosa and Eric Radeski, and our distinguished guests, generous elected honorables. I see our council member, Kevin Reilly, with us, and I know that we are expecting Assembly Speaker Carl Hasty, Borough President Vanessa Gibson, State Senator Jamal Bailey, and also New York City Council member Althea Stevens. I also want to say a very warm and particular thank you to the familiar within the confines of Ostos, that is our VP for Student Development and Enrollment Management, Dr. Latoro Yates, who will be working with colleagues. I think Ms. Tova Thompson from the Counseling Center is beloved by our students, and it's a real presence here. And Michelle Ayala Rivera, so very, very happy to see the 3 of you also conducted the panel. I will be here throughout. I will mute myself and make sure that I don't jump in, because I have a tendency to get really carried away. and just listen. All right. So, mil gracias, bendiciones. And let's begin. Jerry, I think is yours, or Eric, I'm not sure.
Thank you, Madam President. I'll now like to pass the microphone to Dr. Eric Radeski, who will introduce some of our distinguished guests.
Thank you, Jerry. Yes, my name is Dr. Eric Radeski. I'm the Director of Government Affairs here at Ostos Community College. And I see we have some of our distinguished elected officials with us today. Let me call first on Assembly Speaker Carl Hasty. I see him here. Speaker Hasty, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you for joining us. Please say a few words.
Well, I just want to say happy Black History Month to everyone. But every day to me is Black History, and particularly for people of color, so many wonderful things that we've achieved. One of the things that I always like to, when I speak at Black History Month events, I always talk about the things that we take for granted that were actually invented, by Black people, from things like plasma down to the broom, the iron. All of these things that we take for granted was really invented by Black people. So that's why I love to say every day is Black History. And so to have Ostos Community College celebrating Black History, I couldn't help but come and stop in and just say to everyone that is on here, as we're all people of color, we all originated from the same place, Mother Africa. So I would just say to everyone on call, to the faculty, to the students, to my fellow colleagues in government, I really think it's incumbent upon us to take all of the principles of the fights that our ancestors and our forefathers and foremothers took on to get us this far. We should now take it upon ourselves to make sure that the generations that come behind us have an easier time than we had, because we all know that we've had some very difficult times. I know for me, being the first African-American Speaker of the Assembly wasn't easy. When you change history, the present isn't very good to you sometimes when you try to change history and how things were used to being done. But that's our challenge, and that should also be our goal. Again, is to make sure that the next person of color that follows behind me as the Speaker of the Assembly doesn't have to go through the shock treatment that I had to go to, and then it's not we become exceptions. It should be the expectation that we are just as qualified as anybody else to fill any job in any role. So I just want to say happy Black History Month to everybody. Remember, every day is Black History. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you for joining us. And I was remiss in not pointing out you are the first African-American Speaker of the New York State Assembly, which is truly a historic achievement.
Thank you. Thank you.
Also with us today, we have the Bronx Borough President, Vanessa Gibson, who I believe just joined us. Borough President, are you there?
Yes, I am. Good afternoon.
Hi, thank you for joining us. Borough President Vanessa Gibson is the first African-American and first female Borough President of the Borough of the Bronx. And I invite you now to give remarks.
Thank you so much, and good afternoon, everyone. It's always a pleasure to be with you. Thank you to Ostos Community College and to our esteemed Madam President and the executive team and the Board of Trustees at Ostos Community College for inviting my colleagues and I to be a part of this celebration of Black History Month, and it being a reminder of the history, the culture, the diversity, the celebration, and all of the great things that continue to happen in communities of color, and certainly African-American pioneers. I am Bronx Borough President Vanessa Gibson. I am proud to serve as the 14th Borough President. And on January 1st, we were so honored to make history as the first ever African-American and female elected Bronx Borough President. And I know that while I am the first, I should not be the last. I am my ancestors' wildest dreams and all of their hopes and aspirations. Many have come before me and have died for the right to be here, and I stand proudly and broadly on their shoulders, knowing that their labor of love, that their commitment, that their fight for racial equality and social justice, civil rights, and making sure that we continue to affirm the rights of Black Americans and women to vote. I am the reason why all of that struggle has been realized. And I am certainly cognizant of that in my role as borough president, and it is something that I never take for granted. While February is the shortest month on the calendar, it is a reflection of all of the great progress that we've made, Black Americans across the spectrum in so many different fields, so many different areas. I am proud to be among so many other history makers and historical figures, like our Speaker of the Assembly, the Honorable Carl Hastie, our District Attorney, Darcel Clark, our Attorney General, Letitia James, and so many others, including our Speaker of the New York City Council, Adrian Adams. I am so proud to be among this very distinguished group. But really all of my colleagues in government that serve in the New York State Senate, Senator Jamal Bailey, as well as in the New York State Assembly, Assemblymember LaToya Joyner and Assemblymember Chantel Jackson, and certainly in the New York City Council, my successor, Councilmember Althea Stevens, Councilmember Kevin Reilly, and many, many others that serve in the other boroughs. And we are truly a reflection of the diversity of our great borough and our great city. But while we all hold these positions, we have to make sure that we do something with the time that we have. We are all here for a time, a reason, and a season. And it is our job to not only make a difference, but create a lasting legacy for all the young people that follow behind us, to allow them to dream, to allow them to hope, to let them know that their circumstance never determines their future, but they are all destined for success. If many of us listen to some of the people around us, we would not be where we are today. And so I just want to encourage all of our young people out there that you are living history every single day. Never let anyone determine who you are, nor define who you are, but understand that you determine your future. Don't let anyone stand in the way of your dreams. The world is your oyster to explore. And we want you to have access and opportunity. And we want the doors to open for all of you, just as the doors have opened for my colleagues and I. And so February is a month to remember, to reflect, to celebrate, to honor. But if you understand like I do, you know Black History Month is American history and American history is Black history. Every month we should acknowledge prominent Black Americans for the work they've done, not just during the month of February, which we all know started out as National Negro Week before it evolved to Black History Month, but it is truly a reminder of the struggle, of the just the incredible things that we've done, of the magnitude of the work that still needs to be done. And when I think about so many other pillars that come from our communities, the everyday heroes, the everyday sheroes, the teacher, the educator, the school crossing guard, the school safety agent, the social worker, the guidance counselor, the mother, the father, the single parent. I think about all of those unsung heroes and sheroes, and we should honor them too. We should honor our first responders and essential workers who do their jobs every single day without any recognition. They wake up with a commitment to serve, and all they want to do is be rewarded for their work. So I am proud to recognize Black History Month with my colleagues in government, with all of you at Ostos. And I say thank you so much. I look forward to our continued work, and happy Black History Month to each and every one of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Borough President Gibson. That was quite a speech. Next, I would like to introduce and welcome Councilmember Kevin Reilly, who is here with us. Councilmember Reilly, please go ahead.
Thank you, Eric. And it's always a pleasure to follow behind our Madam Borough President, Vanessa Gibson, and my mentor, Assembly Speaker Carl Hastie. And I want to thank Ostos. My sister went to Ostos, who's a graduate. And I really want to commend Ostos for having this conversation today to focus on mental health. When you talk about mental health is not something, as Eric stated before, you can't go into a grocery store and get a mental health pill when you're dealing with something. And when we talk about mental health from community of color, it's kind of difficult for us to address the well-being that we are in mentally. We're always taught in our communities to stay strong when we're going through something, as we're teaching our children growing up, as we were taught growing up. We always taught to stay strong. And it's really challenging to do that when you're going through something mentally. If you follow me on social media, if you follow my journey, I always preach self-care and self-awareness, because it's hard to help others if you can't help yourself. And I always state that a vulnerable heart always leads to a strong mind. So if you're going to make sure that your mind is strong, you have to make sure that your heart is vulnerable. You have to make sure that you're able to express yourself mentally to others in a safe space. So I just want to commend Hostos for creating the safe space for us to talk about mental health and how it impacts the Black community, especially after the COVID-19 pandemic, where we've seen so much people in our communities face so much different insecurities and adversities throughout this pandemic. So to have this safe space where you can talk about mental health and create other dynamics where we can address this through government, through community-based organizations, through educational institutions, is going to be very instrumental to us addressing this mental health issue within our communities moving forward. So I would just like to thank you all. God bless you and happy Black History Month.
Thank you, Councilmember Reilly. Before I introduce our last elected official, I just want to remind our panelists, our elected officials, that following this, we will have a panel discussion on mental health, and you're, of course, welcome to stay if your time permits. Now we have Councilmember Althea Stevens. Councilmember?
Hello, good afternoon, everybody. Happy Black History. I'm always happy to talk after all these great people. And thank you, Speaker Hasty, Madam Borough President, my predecessor, and my sister, and my mentor, and Kevin, who now is like my little brother. So I'm just so happy to be here, and we are amongst family. My daughter actually just graduated from Hostos this June, and now she's attending Borough. We are a CUNY family, so I definitely believe in CUNY and always supporting and bigging up the work that we all do. But I'm really happy to be here and be a part of this conversation because, like so many people who have said, Black history is American history, and it should be celebrated every day, right? And, I do think that we have gotten to a place where actually pushing Black identity forward, a lot of people feel like you're being anti everything else. And so we are often downplaying our successes because other people are not comfortable with that. And so for me, I'm always like, how am I going to be unapologetically Black? Because that's really important to me, because our culture is important, and we built this country and we continue to build this country and save this country. So for me, I'm always excited to make sure that we're here and we're speaking out and we're shining a light on all the great things that we're doing. The fact that we're still in 2021 and we're having the first Black borough president woman. I mean, that's crazy. The first Black speaker in the city council in 2022. These things are, it's kind of shocking to me. Are we excited about it? Absolutely. But those things shouldn't still be going on, because all of the work that we've been doing and pushing forward. But I'm excited to be here and be a part of this team. I think especially in the Bronx, we have some of the best electeds that you can think of, and we're represented very well in the Bronx. And, we have a lot of Black and Latino leadership, and we're all working together. So, that is just, to me, the dynamics of what we're doing of pushing the borough forward. But I do want to speak a little bit about mental health. I think that it's important that we're using this time and space to kind of highlight that mental health in our community, because that is something that's in the Black community that's still stigmatized and we don't talk about and is not promoted. Like Councilmember Reilly said before, we're often just told to be strong, or you can pray it away, or, it'll be all right. But the reality is, a lot of times these issues that we're talking about are mental health issues. Going to therapy isn't something that is often promoted or talked about. A lot of times it's, I remember growing up hearing, what goes on in this house stays in this house, right? And those things are problems, because we are actually really telling people to suppress their trauma. And so for me, I'm always talking we need to make sure that we are creating space for people to feel comfortable to share their experiences and uplift it. Also normalizing going to therapy. I love that, we have like Charlemagne the God, who's been talking about going to therapy, and even folks who have hashtags like Black Joy Love and Black Boy Joy. Those things are important, because those things are not often amplified in our community. So today, I just want to say that we have to make sure that we continue to push this conversation of seeking mental health, making sure that people are understanding that it is okay to have these moments. Depression is a real thing in our community, and it is not okay for us to suffer in silence. So talking to people, making sure we're checking in with one another, encouraging people to go to therapy and speak to social workers. But the other thing is we also have to make sure we're investing in those programs, right? How are we investing in the community-based organizations in our community that do the work and that look like us and can identify with us? One of the things I'll share really quickly before I stop talking is I remember when I was looking to go to therapy, and it was so hard for me to find a woman of color. And I just thought that it was really important because they understand your experiences in a very different way. But one, we don't have a lot of people in this field. And so one, we should be making sure that we're encouraging people to seek that field, right? How are we building a pipeline for people to be in the mental health profession and not just caseworkers, right? We often have that, but how are we supporting people to become therapists and psychologists in those professions? Because it's just something that doesn't happen. Because when we're not in those spaces, things like over-medicating our kids or not being connected and understanding the cultural relevance often comes up. So for me, I think places like Ostos continue to do the work that you're doing, because you're the education pipeline that can really encourage our kids to get into this field and make sure that mental health is a priority in our community. So thank you all, and thank you for having me.
Thank you, Councilmember Stevens, for those words. That's a great way to get us ready for the panel discussion. I just wanted to say that Senator Jamal Bailey wanted to join us today, but he was unavoidably detained, but he did send his warm greetings. So with that, I'd like to pass it back to my colleague, Jerry Rosa.
Thank you, Eric. I would now like to introduce the person who will be leading this conversation as the moderator. Michelle Ayala Rivera is a wife, mama, author, entrepreneur, and international speaker and trainer. Born and raised in the Bronx, New York, she holds a degree in mechanical engineering from Messiah University. After achieving professional success in her field, Michelle chose to further pursue her passion of empowering others to find their voice, identify and walk in their unique gifts, and change their narrative. She has over 25 years of experience creating and facilitating conferences and delivering keynote addresses on a variety of topics. She's also the creator and host of a successful weekly live show with a community spanning throughout the United States and in 6 different countries. She's completing coursework to become a board-certified functional medical nutritionist in order to enhance the health of and provide educational resources to underserved communities. Michelle currently resides in Lansdowne, Pennsylvania with her husband and 4 miracle babies. All right, so we'll now begin the conversation. You're welcome to place comments or questions in the Q&A box, which is at the bottom. This will be reviewed during the segment of the program. So without further delay, Michelle Ayala Rivera.
Thank you so much. It is such an honor to be here. I'm so excited. This is very much near and dear to my heart, being from the Bronx and hearing it's hard in Pennsylvania. I get to hear my accent. Everybody's talking. We all sound the same. We all have the same cadence in how we talk. We all have the same energy. I am so thrilled to be a part of such an incredible event. So we are going to get started. Thank you so much for being here. And the first question that I just want to throw out to everyone who is going to be participating is growing up, I love what Althea Stevens was saying and just the discussions of mental health in her family and growing up and just in general, that experience. I want to throw that out to everybody else. Growing up, did your family discuss the topic of mental health?
Hi, I'll start off. My name is Latoro Yates. I'm a new Vice President for Student Development and Enrollment Management at Ostos Community College. Today is 1 month on the job, and I'm here, hit the ground running and ready to serve the students of the South Bronx and the Bronx at large. Growing up, my family, I'm from the South, so my family owns a church, and I would say teeter the line of almost being evangelical in the way that we are Southern Baptists. And a part of, as someone mentioned before, that if there was an issue, that issue was taken care of in the house first and in the church second. And I can count on more than one hand how many times I heard that you could pray your way out of situations. And I do believe that you can pray your way out of situations, but there is a need to have additional resources. And for many of our youth, unfortunately, it's not perceived that the issues that they're going through are that serious. And before social media, some of the ways that these messages are put out of some of the struggles, it wasn't that way. So these struggles still existed, but the knowledge of how severe these struggles were having was different back then than what it is now. So I think if I would have had the access to mental health resources as a youth, it would have helped me to move faster in my progression to just literally trying to be healthy. So in essence, so I grew up in violence. My father was murdered when I was 15 months old. So my mother raised 3 boys in that circumstance, and she raised us as to be healthy individuals, but we didn't have access to the type of resources that was needed to help us heal through that trauma. So a part of who I am today is based off of living through that trauma. And my goal is to try to help as many young people as possible to know that there is a way to help them deal with their everyday life and things that are serious to them. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Yates. Anyone else? These conversations, what did they look like? What did they sound like in your homes growing up?
Let me unmute myself. So I'm Tova Thompson. I'm one of the student psychological counselors in the counseling center here at Ostos. And so I'm very happy to be here. So thank you all for this space. You're right, upbringing brings a lot to the whole plate when you look at everything. And so my upbringing, I'm first generation. I came here from Jamaica. And so Caribbean background, we don't talk about this at all. You function from a space of survival. To be able to say I'm not okay is not acceptable. To say that I need help is not acceptable. To say I feel is not acceptable. We understand anger. That is something that is okay. That is something that is all right. And you learn to just suppress whatever you're feeling. You just put it to the side and you do what you have to do. You learn to function. And if you see someone that's not capable of doing that, then now this person is weak. They're just a madman. They're just a mad woman. They just don't care. And those are the messages that were pretty much ingrained. So for me to be the person who wants to talk about feelings, no, this is not what we do. Don't do that. And it took a lot of courage to be the one in my family to say, hey, this isn't right. And even as an adult, we can now have these conversations, and I'm grateful for that. I was helpful in bringing around that change within my family, but that was not an easy task. You know what I mean? That was a road you had to travel alone. And so being able to say, okay, I'm okay with traveling this road and being the one to bring about change because I realize there's something more. There's something else that needs to happen to make us all be okay in the long run. And not just okay in the space of I have a roof over my head, shoes on my feet, and clothes on my back, and food on the table. Because oftentimes when you're functioning from the space of survival, this is all that matters. But do I feel accepted? Do I feel okay in who I am? Am I all right with being sad? Am I anxious? Am I nervous? Am I worried? These are all things too that are a part of the human experience.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Now, it's interesting that you're saying these things, and please, elected officials that are on, we are so happy that you're here. We invite you also to share your experiences. If there's anything that you feel you'd like to contribute with respect to these questions that we're asking, please do, because it is a great conversation that we're having. And like Tova was saying, it is in essence a very rare conversation that we need to make a lot less rare. So it's forums like this that start the conversation, but this certainly shouldn't be where it ends. This should be the beginning of things. So I loved to hear both of you sharing, if there's anyone else, again, please feel free about the conversation and things like that. Jerry, I see you're unmuting.
Yes, we have a hand raised in the audience.
Okay.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Karen Martinborough, and I work in the Human Resources Department. And I'm grateful for this space. I'm here listening with my kids. I'm working remotely today, and I have 2 young adults with me, and they encouraged me to say something because, like Miss Thompson, I have a Caribbean background, and I don't know how much you guys know, but being from the Caribbean, you are told to shut up, toughen up, put on a brave face, smile, suppress your feelings. And I've seen where this hurt me, but it also hurt my children too. So I'm trying to change that. Every day now, I try to think before I act. I try to be calmer when I'm dealing with my young ladies. And I have a son as well. So I'm really thankful for this opportunity to hear what you guys are saying and sharing, and also consider it me learning more to deal with my young people at home. So thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that. No, I love that it's all a very common theme with that, being communities of color, coming from the Caribbean, coming from places. It's sounding like the theme is the silence is very much a part of our identity and our culture. It is very much like Tova was saying, like a sign of strength. It's told to us as, you know, being silent and just sucking it up and dealing with it is a sign of strength. So what made things click for you all that have shared, and anyone else that's listening? How do you make that distinction between still being very proud you are in your culture, and yet you are doing something that seems to completely defy it by having conversations, by seeking mental health? What things clicked for you?
If I may, it was probably 4 or 5 times when I asked for a number for a therapist from a friend. I know he had went to the therapist, and I saw before I knew why, but he just had this bright light about him, and I asked him about it, and he shared that he had started going to therapy. So I asked him for the number the first time, and then I went home and I started talking to family members and asking questions that people thought about this. And the reaction that I received from family members and friends about therapy was so like almost, it was almost vicious. Like, it was just like, why are you even bringing this up as something? We don't do that. We don't talk about that. And so I would put it away for a couple of months, and then but I kept circling back to, so I just felt that it was something that I just needed to do. And I eventually, as you mentioned, it just seemed like breaking away from family and friend tradition to do something I felt that was necessary. I wanted to learn coping skills. I wanted to understand myself better. And I searched out, and I was able to find a Black female Christian woman. And she has just been so amazing. And it's been 4 years for me that I've been going through these sessions. And I go and I feel so empowered, because sometimes it's easier to be able to talk with her about things that I can't as easily talk about with family members or talk about with friends. And since I've been on this journey, it has made that conversation so much easier for so many others in my family to start. I helped start those conversations, but it was something I found that many in my family wanted to start therapy or think about therapy or start walking towards it, but face that backlash that sometimes comes from even just asking questions about it. So I try to provide a shield in my family to at least create that options for others to search out, because to me, it's about healing. And that's what it did for me.
Awesome. Ms. Thompson, would you like to share?
So I think for me, it's always been somewhere there. It's within my temperament, because I always say, thankfully, I get paid to be who I am. When I made the decision to go to grad school to get my degree in mental health counseling, and I'm hearing some of the things that they're saying, I'm like, oh, that's what that's called? Because these are things that I've always done throughout my life with family and friends. And so although we like to keep everything to ourselves, when we do find someone who's willing to listen, people will talk, right? So once you find that safe space, you're like, okay, I can let it out now. It might not be in the most constructive of ways, of course, but it will come out nonetheless. And so I figured there has to be something there, right? Sure. How do we make it make sense? And even now, within setting boundaries, my friends are my friends, my family, you're my family, I love you. But I also make sure it's known I can't be a therapist, right? Because there has to be that boundary, because there's a different way that conversation flows, right? And so even just educating them along with the process of how that looks, right? That's where that change comes in, because you normalize that conversation for yourself, whether it's what you believe, what you practice, what you've experienced, and that's how things start to change. So that's where it kind of came for me. I don't know where it came from, but it was always somewhere there in the back of my mind. And here I am today.
That's awesome.
Michelle, can I jump in?
Absolutely, please do.
Thanks. So growing up, I heard a lot of times things like "take it like a man," which I guess is something that was said to little boys. I don't know if parents still say that, but it's this kind of philosophy of, if something's bothering you, just deal with it internally, walk it off, don't make a big thing about it. But there have been times in my life when I've sought out therapy. Once when going through a very bad breakup, a couple times when going through serious illnesses. And it can be helpful, because those are situations in my life when I was dealing with something that I realized I wasn't mentally and emotionally equipped to handle on my own. Now, those are therapy relationships that, lasted for a little while, but didn't continue after that. I recently looked into finding a new therapist to deal with all of the stress that has been caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. I didn't completely follow through on that, so that's on my to-do list. But something that I did notice when I was thinking about that was that I started speaking honestly to certain friends about some of the things that I've been feeling. And they basically said, yeah, me too. I'm feeling the same way, whether it's with family or with professional obligations, or just, again, the general stress and havoc that's been created over the past 2 years. And of course, as Latoro and Tover have said, talking to family and friends is not the same as getting, the professional guidance and help of a therapist. But I found it was helpful to both me and my friends to say, this is what I've been going through, and to recognize that it isn't just me, and it's not just him, and it's not just her. Everyone right now, I think, is dealing with some sort of stress from the past couple of years. And just being able to talk about that and say, I can freely mention these things to people I trust, is a type of relief. So, it's perhaps another option that we should think about when trying to handle all of the stress of the past 2 years.
Thank you so much for sharing. And I know we're talking a lot. I love that we're talking about the ways that we change things. And I do want to push that further, talking about how to change. But let's take a step back for a second and just look at, why is mental health such a taboo subject? Especially it's coming out in the discussion in specific demographics, in specific communities, especially communities of color. We have comments coming in. We have ways that people are, the coping mechanisms that are silence, and certain cultures that are being told to man up and things like that. Again, being tied into identity and culture. Why do people look at mental health? Because it seems like we're all in agreement. Even when it's happening, we know it's wrong. Like, even as we're struggling through it, we know as a child, this is not okay. This is, and yet we go along with staying silent and not saying anything. So why do you think, in your opinion, people look at mental health as such a taboo subject?
So I think that to acknowledge that there is a mental health related issue, or that you need help, or that you need support, requires a degree of vulnerability that most people are not comfortable with. And so because of that, if I open up, now I open myself to ridicule. I open myself up to the opinions of others. I might walk into a room where the person might not understand anything that I say, and I'm completely judged or misunderstood. These are things that no one really would voluntarily want to sign themselves up for, to be quite honest. And so I think to deal with what comes with the vulnerability, that's what makes it taboo, because it's easier to just keep it to the side and not deal with it myself in front of the mirror, but not with anyone else. So I think that's what contributes a lot to it being this taboo subject.
Thank you.
I also think that there's these myths that are attached to mental health. So in doing some preparation for this panel discussion, and I Googled myths of mental health, and some things that popped up is mental health care is only for people with severe problems. Mental health treatments don't work. It's not normal to struggle. Mental health struggles are inevitable, so there's nothing you can do about it. So when you have so many of these myths that are so prevalent out there, and it crashes or clashes against what we define as culture, depending on the background, those are some of the things that can prevent people who are so interested or think it's necessary from doing it, because you go against the culture of what's happening inside the home, as we mentioned, inside the church, inside the community, and then you match that with some things that you're already hearing, and that's not coming from professionals. I found it interesting that one or two family friends that I did talk to about mental health, they had a negative opinion about it, but it was because of they went to sessions younger at a different time period and just had a bad experience with that one therapist. So for them now, all therapy is terrible and nobody should ever go through it, versus it could have just been, they just didn't have the right match. But that's not the way that it's presented. It's presented that all therapy is terrible. And then you peel back the onion a little bit and find out it was that experience. So I just find it, we have to be very careful and critical how we talk about mental health, and make sure that even if I have a bad experience, I have to continue to say, but I still think that there's a need for it in our community.
Thank you. There's a great comment that just came in from Linda Alexander that said, silent strength is a coping mechanism to address survival in a racist social culture. It is driven by the historical need for parents to keep their children safe, and part of the post-traumatic slave syndrome that still plagues people of color. How would any of you respond to something like that? That silence is a coping mechanism, and it's a protection. It's a guard.
The minute you decide to bring anything that's going on outside of the household, it is now free to interpretation from anyone else. There's a very fine line. So something as simple as discipline and abuse, there's a very, very, very fine line. And everyone has a different opinion on that. But the simplest thing, now it goes to a whole situation where your children are removed. If you have a child in the classroom and they like to speak up and they like to advocate for themselves, now they have a problem. They may be placed into a different classroom. So something as simple as where the intentions, there was nothing ill within the intention, but now there was a whole problem that literally trickled down afterwards. And you can see this throughout history, so oftentimes, if I stay silent, if I blend in, if I stay quiet, I'll keep you safe so you can be here for another day.
There are comments coming in as well. And thank you for those that are putting something in the chat and in the Q&A. There is in line with that, as someone that commented, as a Puerto Rican male, the comments about needing help being seen as a sign of weakness resonated with me. In your experiences, how do we begin to break this stigma? So how do we? We've been talking about, okay, this is taboo. We kind of all know these are the reasons. There's systematic things that are in place. There's regardless really of specific culture, it's kind of blanketed as far as the reasons, the things that we do, the practices of keeping silent, of everything stays in the house. Whatever happens in here stays here. We don't share those things. You know, concepts of machismo and being a man is not crying and not being broken and not being vulnerable and things like that. We know these things. We are in a position now to see that's not okay. How do we begin to break that? Like, I know that you guys have had personal breakthrough, which are phenomenal, but a lot of times you can be seen as a magical unicorn. Okay, so you're one person in your family, and it's not always received, you know, from what you guys have been saying. It's not like, oh my gosh, it's so great. You've done something I've always wanted to do. How do we, in light of that, in light of the possible, for lack of a better word, backlash that you can receive, how do we begin to break that stigma?
I think it's important to speak out. I think it's important when it comes to beyond just family gatherings. Like, for example, with social media, it's so easy. It's what most people, well, some people post on social media, and it's obvious all of the good things that are happening every day, right? Or it's a good vacation, or I got a job promotion, or I got something that's positive, and I support that. But I think it's equally important to talk about issues that are impacting our lives. Like, I talk about mental health on all the social media platforms that I'm on all the time. And it's interesting, I had a family member said, well, you've made it through school and you work at a college, so you need help. Like, it's like, yeah, everyone needs help. Yes. So the more that we can make securing health a normal thing, and make it and to me, it's opening doors for others to be able to walk through the door. So sometimes we have to be the ones in our community to step forward. And when we hear someone talk about mental health, or when we hear someone talking in a manner or writing in a manner or reaching out without reaching out, that we acknowledge it and then be able to, I do it often where if I see a post or something, I would inbox a person and just say, hey, if you need to talk, I'm here. The person didn't ask for it, but the type of post that the person is making is that it seems that a person is in distress. And just being able to reach out to people and make this experience real for people and put ourselves out there. And again, I think Tova said it perfectly. When you put yourself out there in this way, it opens the door for others' perceptions and interpretations. Mm-hmm. And I'm okay with that. So if it's something that I feel that could be helpful, I will talk about it and speak about it in every platform I have an opportunity to do it.
Thank you. Yes, I agree. Vulnerability tends to be contagious. So, Tova, you look like you were going to say something.
The other thing that I would add to that is being consistent. If you are known to be a person that doesn't like cursing around you or yelling around you, say that. Continue to say it and don't change. If there's people in your family, if there are people in your family that you believe could benefit from it, whenever the opportunity presents itself, stay firm in that, right? Because the minute you waver, then now that you'll be surprised who's paying attention and who's listening, right? And so that means for yourself, be okay with being uncomfortable because you're staying true to yourself. And even in your spaces of sharing with others, do it your way. I think that was one of the things that I kind of struggled with a little bit as a new therapist, because, you have what the book tells you, what you learn and the tools and all of that. And I agree with it, but how do I do it? And so I found myself struggling. Oh, it's supposed to be this way. And I had to remember there is a reason why I chose to do this. There is a reason why I am in this position. So I'm going to do it, and I'm going to do it the way that I know how, the way that sits best with me. And after I made that decision, it made me a better therapist. I've had many people who said, I didn't think therapy would be like this, And looking at those benchmarks in those sessions when they can say, oh, I had a conversation with someone else about what therapy is like. And I recommended them to do it for themselves. This is how you change the perception. This is how you change the conversation, by being consistent with who you are.
Yes, yes. Go ahead, Eric.
Thank you, Michelle. So I'm reminded of a quote from, I believe it was Gandhi, who said, "Be the change you want to see in the world." And something that I've reminded myself in moments of real frustration is that I can only control my own actions. So while I might like the world externally to change, the only person I have control over is myself. So I need to try to find ways to, with everything, including mental health, be the change that I want to see. And when I think about different people in my life who have been mentors, who have been helpful to me, whether in school or in a professional setting, some of the most helpful things they ever pointed out to me was, that they don't have all the answers, or that something that I identify as a concern, they'll say, yes, that's a concern to me as well, whatever that might be. So those were powerful learning moments for me. And to the extent that I've had the chance to provide leadership or mentorship to people who are younger than me, usually in professional settings, I try to communicate that as well when I think it's appropriate. Like, just because I'm a little bit older and maybe have a little bit more experience doesn't mean I have all the answers. And I hope that they take comfort in someone who has, I don't know if I'm a mentor, but someone who to a younger person might seem to have a little bit more clout. I hope that they take comfort in someone like that saying, I also worry about some of these things, and it's perfectly natural for you to as well.
Thank you so much. Another theme that keeps coming up is just that, having the conversations, having the courage to have the conversations, having the courage to say the things. Tova, you were saying that, my therapy didn't look like the things that we were reading in our books and everything else, the textbook. And I think it needs to be said, because those textbooks were not written from a cultural perspective, or they weren't written from the demographics and the communities that we seem to be a part of. It wasn't written by people of color and those communities, which that culture is very much a part of it. Someone, Diana said in the comments, increase the number of culturally competent mental health practitioners. That can't happen if what is being taught tends to be not in line with the culture that we're dealing with. Can you guys speak to that, as far as in line with that, the things that you're doing, that you are changing, but also in line with that, some things that you wish you knew earlier? Like, you're learning these things now after you've gone through it and you've seen essentially, okay, this didn't work or that didn't work, or having that desire to change the narrative for your communities, and yet not seeming to have the tools, the effective tools to do so. What are some of the things that you wish you knew earlier, and that you wish people of color or people in certain demographics knew about mental health?
I think this, growing up in an urban environment, I think so many of us in that experience are in survival mode from birth. And by being in survival mode, it takes away the opportunity to sometimes dream about other things. So being able to focus in on something that you may not even know is actual trauma was something that I struggled with. And having the resources to be able to secure the type of treatment that could be helpful. One of the things that's been, we can extrapolate from the COVID-19 pandemic is the number of people that, and people of color and people in urban environments, rural environments, that just don't have adequate access to healthcare. And making sure that we make available the resources that are out there for people. And make sure that as we move people out from a social mobility index, and we get in them and we're helping them as far as academically and educationally, and they're receiving the credentials that can help them to be able to secure a future and a career, but to also add mental health as a major component as we continue to grow. As that's how I look at myself.
I think opening a door for more experiences that focus on positivity. A person deciding to send an email, sit down for a phone call, or walk into your office, that takes a lot. And acknowledging that strength from the very beginning, to even begin asking the question, acknowledging that as well. Another thing that I think was really helpful too is making sure that you highlight that you are the expert in your life. My job is to support you, because it doesn't matter how many techniques or skills or degrees I have, I can't be an expert in your life. You are. So when you give them that space where I'm the expert, then they can share, and then you break it down and you work through it together. That's what that therapeutic relationship is. That's what building that rapport is, working side by side. I think another thing that I think is really important for people to know is that, and I think someone alluded to it earlier, you don't have to come when it's beyond your control. You don't have to wait till it gets that far, right? Because, and I like to compare it to going to the regular doctor, going to the dentist, right? You know, if you wait too long, it won't be so nice, right? But if we make this a routine, you want to do your hair, your nails, whatever it is, associating it with regular parts of the normal human experience. That way it doesn't seem like you're doing something different. The more you normalize it, the more normal it feels when you decide to seek it or you're curious about it. And then also making sure that they know that, because a lot of people would come to therapy with the mindset, oh, you're going to fix things for me. You're going to give me the answers. No, we create a space for you to explore and be able to find that out and to experience yourself in a different way. And that they have rights. A lot of times people feel that, well, just because you said this, this is what it is. Or this is who I'm paired with. This is who I have to stay with. If you and that person don't connect, you have the ability to find others. If there's an assignment that you get and you don't understand how it connects to your treatment goals, you have the right to ask questions, because this is a commitment and an investment in yourself, not in your therapist. And so those are the messages in the very beginning. Those are the conversations that happen. So long after, these are the things that you also go back to, because when you choose to seek help, you're seeking it because there's something that you need within yourself. And when those good moments come, when those milestones, when you reach them, you're the one that feels that as well too. And you build that foundation from the very beginning.
Thank you so much. I want to circle back to something that you said about that I think is really crucial. You were, both of you and everyone that's been contributing has been talking about, but specifically about something you said as far as acknowledging the strength that it took to just make the phone call or send the email. That in and of itself seems incredibly empowering. Like that seems, just that moment of saying, if we do nothing else today, if you just sit here, kind of like Good Will Hunting, like if you just sit here, it is still enormous. And I want to acknowledge the fact that it took superhero strength for you to even get to a point to come here, to say something, to write the email, to ask for help, to even post on social media something's going on, for someone like Dr. Yates to be like, hey, you know, what's going on here? I'm noticing that. It seems incredibly empowering to be able to explain to people that you are essentially dating therapists. The control is in your hands. You get to choose who helps you. You're not going to this because you're helpless. You're going to here, you're seeking help because you want to be better. But you, again, a position of empowerment, you get to ask questions. You get to say no. You get to walk away. You get to control the situation. Do you feel, in your opinion, and the things that we've been talking about, that is that idea of empowerment, that idea of being empowered to make these decisions is absent because of the history and because of the culture and because of the norm of demographics that have essentially been stripped of power and authority, that have essentially been told for centuries, you have no choice, you have no power, you have no. In your opinion, do you feel like that underlying unspoken, maybe subconscious kind of understanding plays into the resistance of seeking help, of saying something, because they feel like it's just going to be something else that is forced upon them?
I definitely think that plays a part, and that's why it's important to have those conversations, redefining what independence is, what strength is, because perception plays a big role in how we function, and how we see ourselves in the world. So yeah.
I also think it's important for someone to just say, it's okay. It's okay to go out to seek services, to seek help. There's a researcher named Prudence Carter who wrote a book called Keeping It Real. And she coined the term called multicultural navigator, which is a person who have a love, respect, and understanding for a given community, and will be able to be a bridge between that community and the system, whatever that system may be. Because for so many of us, there's a fear of just simply going to the doctor. There's a fear of an interaction with the fire department or interaction with the police department, and having more of us that we are the multicultural navigators. So we are the ones that once we take a step and put ourselves out there as someone who is open to therapy, who can talk positively about experiences, can talk about the search, why I was hesitant for almost a year before I finally made that phone call. And so nervous. And when I sat down, and after 10 minutes, I felt like this is something I should have been doing my whole life. So we are the mentors, whether we know it or not. We are the people that within the community are looking up to us. And if they see us moving out of survival and into that next step, and then a step after that, and a step after that, I think we can be that bridge for them to help them to feel more comfortable and understanding their power, no matter what the situation, no matter what the dynamic is, knowing that they are in control.
Thank you so much. Go ahead.
And another thing I would add to that is we are also the ones that can translate it back. So we can speak in this way, and then we translate it back. So you would have a situation where the goal is A, B, C, and D. We have to break it down into 1, 2, 3. And then once you have an understanding, I give it back to you in A, B, C, and D. And now you feel even more empowered because this term is no longer foreign to you. It is something you now accept, you've worked through, you've created, and now you establish some ownership in it yourself.
Yes. Do you feel like, continuing a little bit with the empowerment, and then we'll shift gears a little as far as moving forward from here. How significant do you think it is to have people in mental health services that are people of color? Is it super significant, or is it enough to just have training for people who are not people of color, but training to work with communities of color?
My answer to that, I would say there is power in representation. There's definitely power in representation, but there's also power in transparency. And so both of them have to function in the same space, because even though I may be a Black woman, I can't speak for the experience of every Black woman, you know? So finding the balance between the two, that's where success lies.
Thank you for that. Anyone else before we just move the conversation? I know we have a few minutes left before we open it up to questions from the audience. Okay, and there are a lot of, by the way, in the comments, a lot of thank yous come to people that are speaking, that are sharing. Thank you guys so much. There's tons of things that are coming in. I'm trying to make sure I'm staying on top of that too. Moving forward and just kind of It's very easy to stay in this conversation and to marinate in this and to go over lamenting what the issues are and the lack of representation and the taboo and the stigma and the cultural aspects and the challenges. But there are things that are in place. There are things that are in place to move us towards a position or a place of being better capable of taking care of our mental health. What are some of the anticipated government initiatives that address these mental health issues that you know of, or things that your office is providing, your position, the position that you're in? Can you speak to those things that are being offered moving forward and the solutions that are in place?
Do you want to go first, VP?
Okay. Go ahead, that's fine. Go ahead.
Speaking from, as a representative of the counseling center, we've tried to incorporate different ways to make therapeutic topics or mental health related topics less intimidating. So, we use music, we use games, and we have some things that are candid conversations, and we literally make it very informal. And people come and they can just share openly, and it doesn't feel like there's this additional pressure. I think one of the other things is that we do have the flexibility within your sessions, right? So, we were exposed to working remotely, so we do have in person, and we still have, remote access, because increasing access is one of the most important things when it comes to that. And I also think another thing that we've tried to do is collaborating with different units and different departments, making sure that people realize taking care of this part of yourself is another thing that you have to do, but it's included in that Hostos experience, right? Because Hostos offers so many different things to tackle this, and that. So as a student, you literally have access to every single thing and take advantage of it. Why not? So I think those are some of the things that we've done. And then, within our unit, we have to do professional development. So we have to make sure that we, keep on top of everything and stuff like that. So, and then, the state requires the legal piece too. So we have to, if we don't do that, we can't even sit in the office and have a conversation, right? So there's multiple levels of checkpoints. And I think the thing that I think is the most important, we genuinely love what we do and we care about students and what we do. I believe you have to have a certain temperament and a certain degree of compassion to do this kind of work. And I can honestly say wholeheartedly, we genuinely love what we do and we care. And so we bring all of that each and every day. So I think that's what we're doing. And hopefully I am speaking completely in full accuracy, on behalf of the counseling center. But yeah, we're small, but we try to work hard.
Right. Thank you. Dr. Yates, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I would just say that nationally, when going through the COVID pandemic, it's been an understanding that there has to be funding, need to be funding that goes to K through 12 colleges and university to help connecting mental health and wellness. And one of the things that we learned going right at the height of the COVID pandemic was that the amount of students participating in counseling, that number dropped precipitously. And one of the things we think about that's a good tie into this conversation is that there are some students who utilize counseling services, and people within their home don't even know that they utilize those counseling services. So then once this pandemic happened and you're at home and you're utilizing your laptop and you have a therapy session, and I may live in a one-bedroom apartment. So where am I going to go to have my therapy session? I remember when I would have a session and online and using telehealth, and I'm having a session and my wife would walk upstairs and walk through, and I'm like, well, I'm having a session. Can I have this moment, please? So just understanding that we need to create every access point possible for students to be able to connect with counseling services. And the more that we're able to do that, I think that we can start to increase that participation rate. We have to increase it back to what it was before the pandemic happened. And I believe even increase it even more than that, because there's a lot of work we're going to have to all go through to continue to heal through this moment we've been experiencing for the past 2 to 3 years.
Correct. And the aftermath and then the unexpected. None of us have ever really lived through a plague. Like none of us have ever really, we've gone through some things, but we haven't essentially done that. And so we don't know how it's affecting us mentally. So we need to walk through this together. Someone had put in the comment section, the difference between illness. There's like, if you just take out the I and add in we, illness becomes wellness. And so the idea of doing this together as a community, of constantly having the conversation, constantly destigmatizing it by just making it more common. One last question I want to put out there before we open it up to Q&A from anyone that is watching. What can we do to improve the mental health of those that we care about? I know there are initiatives like the mental health first aid training and things like that to recognize the signs and this, the symptoms of someone maybe in a mental health crisis or things like that. What, in your opinion, can be done from a parent that's watching, a student that's watching, a staff member that's watching, that maybe, they're not part of the counseling center. Maybe they're here, or maybe there is someone that is a student and there's a family member in the background that is ear hustling essentially to what's happening. What would you say are things that we can do to help improve that mental health of those that we care about?
I would say being mindful of the way we speak. Sometimes we would make a comment and we don't even realize that can actually hurt someone. One of them, it's like, oh, this weather is bipolar. Like people say these things, right? So making sure that we're mindful of the way that we speak in anything, whether, because you never know who's listening, right? And we are in a day and age where, there was a time where we had to have these encyclopedias and you had to go through the encyclopedia to find something, but we're in a space now where you can literally type it in, and before you finish the question pops up. So if there's something that you're curious about, something that you want to know more about, something that you're unsure about, type it in, and utilize what you have access to, because there is power in education. There truly, truly is. So if you're curious, look it up. There's so many different national websites for every specific thing that you possibly could want. And you would find images, you would find frequently asked questions. So whatever the topic is, you literally can find information online. And I think that's a great thing for us to have access to that we didn't many years ago.
Thank you. The question just came into that. Are there specific resources on campus that staff can tap into specifically?
I do know that there is a program. There's an actual training that is for faculty and staff. It's the Cognito program, where literally it will take you through like some vignettes and things like that, so you can learn how to respond to certain things and different topics and stuff like that related to students. And there's like little questionnaires that you can answer. So that's a training that staff and faculty have access to within the Ostos community. The counseling center, we also have like a resource page as well on our site. We also do have an Instagram where we would put up information, because there are different things, different mental health related things that are celebrated each month. So there's like resources there, and especially we put up things during finals and midterms time as well. That's another resource. And we also do presentations. That's another thing when it comes to outreach. So if there's a department that wants to know a little bit more about how to refer a student or how to manage certain topics that might come up, we can do presentations for that. or if there's a professor they want us to come into their classroom, whether it's virtually or in person, and we can, do a 5-minute spiel, or we can be there for the whole duration of the class. We can do that as well too. So there's a variety of options, and options equal access, right? So whichever works best, so there's definitely quite a few from us specifically within Hostos.
Thank you. And I see Dr. Yates is putting lots of really informative links and websites in the chat as well. So please be sure to check those out as you are, even if you need to take a screenshot and take a look at them later on. Was there anyone that wants to just, as we're bringing this to a close, and I'll turn it over to Jerry, just some closing remarks, just in general about the things that we're talking about here, breaking down the stigma, making it less taboo, getting the help, making this more normal, addressing the elephant in the room, essentially, of the pandemic that has, affected us and our mental well-being, even for the sheer not having experienced something like this before. Any closing remarks from anyone before I turn it over to Jerry?
I'll just say that it's normal to struggle. I put in the chat that 20% of people in the US suffer from anxiety, and approximately 7% experience an episode of major depression. So when we go through our daily lives and we go through these moments, it's important to know that it's normal, and it's something that we're not the only ones that are experiencing it in a given moment. So, my statement is to say something, like to reach out and to move away. Don't let the stereotype or the negativity or backlash or any of it stop you. If you feel that you need help, and to reach out for resources. And if I can help in any way, do not hesitate to contact.
Thank you.
And I just want to echo things that Tova and Latoro have said. I think Tova was responding to your question, Michelle, about what we should do when engaging with family members or friends, and she said to be mindful. I would add to listen, because sometimes when we're talking to people in everyday conversations, what we're really doing is waiting for our turn to speak. And when someone's trying to connect with you and tell you something important, you can miss that if you're not listening for it. And what Dr. Yates said that I think is also very important was this idea that if you try therapy and you don't like the therapist that you pick, that doesn't need to be the end of your, delving into that world. If the therapist doesn't work for you, time to find a new therapist. It doesn't mean that therapy has no value. So that's all I'd like to add.
Thank you.
I would say no man is an island and no man stands alone. We need each other. And so remembering that whenever you feel isolated, whenever you feel alone, because this pandemic has brought a lot of the risk factors are literally crunched in one, and you experience them and it's multiplied by 10. But no one is alone, and you don't have to ride out this storm alone. Whether it's a conversation, an email, whatever it is, to whoever you feel most comfortable with, know that you don't have to be alone.
Thank you so much. Well, I want to thank all of you that were just here and contributed, and heartfelt, again, just seeing comments that are coming up in the chat about how grateful people are for the sincerity and the vulnerability and the authenticity. And this is certainly just one of those things that can begin the conversation, like we said, and just be that first domino that keeps knocking those other ones down. So with that, I will turn it back over to Jerry. Thank you again, panelists, and everyone that shared today. All I keep seeing is that it was incredibly helpful. So it was just an honor to be here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. So let's give a big hand to our panelists and our moderator for such an engaging conversation. We would also like to thank the elected officials for their participation and their words. We would like to give special thanks to the Counseling Center, especially Tova Thompson, for their words, and the Division of Student Development and Enrollment Management for their support in making this event possible. Additional thanks go out to the President's Office and the Office of Communications.